There is a snapshot of the man's career. Here is the man in full uniform, Brigadier General David Fraser. Nice to see you.
Good to be here.
How are you?
Thank you.
Welcome home. You've been home for a bit now?
I have.
I know one of the things you talked about when you came home, and we've been hearing a lot about it, either from the soldiers or for the commanding officers, is how Canadians aren't getting the full story, not finding out what's really going on there in Afghanistan. We have lots of media there, lots of coverage. What are we missing? What are we not getting?
The details. I think the details of what our 2,500 great men and women are doing over there every day. And part of my job coming back home here is to go and talk to Canadians and tell them what we're doing.
What are those details?
Well, while I was there, in the 9 months that I was there, we built 150 kilometers of road, 100,000 meters of canals. We elected 400 community councils, those councils that you and I take for granted. We helped a governance structure of Governor Abdul Khalid. Let me just tell you about the guy who just got wounded here a couple of days ago. He's a real patriot, a real leader. When I first met him, something would happen, he would jump out of his chair, race to his SUV, go downtown, grab his AK-47 and go deal with it. I mean, not quite what you expect the Premier of Ontario to do. And after he did that
Ralph Klein would have totally done it, by the way.
Ralph Klein would have done it, but we do have police forces and other forces. But when I left, he was doing exactly what we would expect him to be doing. But 2 years ago, that's all he had, and great people. There was 1,000 policemen when I got there in Kandahar province for a population of about 1 million. I mean, can you imagine Toronto with that? Now there's, we got 2,300 more positions there. We got 30% more Army there. And infant mortality rate went from about 40 odd per thousand in 2002. It's down to about 120.
Now, is that because of building hospitals, or is that what would contribute to that? Because even in 9 months, we can't turn that around in 9 months.
No, I mean, and the story of Afghanistan is built over years. It's war and peace. And we're in Chapter 4. You just can't take a snapshot. And, the Mirwais Hospital is better. There are more people who have got access to medical support than there were there, years ago and when I was there.
It's interesting you taking a snapshot. That's an interesting point in that the West and other countries around the world have had their hands in Afghanistan for a long time, gone in, played a key role in breaking it, and not done a great job in rebuilding. And I think there are a lot of people who see our role and the other countries' roles in Afghanistan now saying, what are we going to do that's going to fix it this time? Because eventually the troops are going to leave and it's just going to be in the same spot, if not worse.
Well, the score right now is Afghanistan 3, international community 0. Alexander the Great went in there, got beat.
Yep.
British went in there several times, got beat.
Soviets went in there, beat.
Got beat. The difference here is we were invited. They weren't. Karzai invited us. The Afghans invited us this time. And, T.E. Lawrence made a quote back in 1918. This is their country, their challenge. Let them do it their way as imperfectly as possible, and let's not do it for them. And that's really the approach that we in Canada has taken over there, is to listen to Afghans, to let them do it their way. And we're actually making a success.
A lot of people watching this show have friends or family that are over there. Like I said, 2,500 Canadians are doing their work there, and they do see the stories. And obviously it is newsworthy when somebody loses their life or gets injured. I mean, you actually went on patrols out there, didn't you?
All the time.
I
mean, I went on patrols, I slept out with the troops, and, I had 9 nations working with me, not just from Canada. 220,000 square kilometers, about 9,000 troops.
Is it different when you command your own country's troops and then you command a series of countries' troops? Is there a different way to do that?
No, command is command.
Do they listen the same way?
They listen the same way. They execute slightly differently and whatnot. But having walked away, when you watch Canadians do stuff, I was commander of all of them, but when you see Canadians do stuff inside, there's a big smile on your face when you see them excelling. Because I'll tell you, July of last year, Sangin, Canada's first attack, since the Korean War at the brigade level. We were attacking in Sangin because the Karzai government wanted us to go there. We got the call that a town called Garmisher had fallen, 160 kilometers to the south. Karzai phones down the governor. Governor calls me and he says, I want you to go take care of it. I told the Canadians to go down, and 24 hours later, they retook the town. That's an amazing story.
You hear an awful lot of conversation back home in Canada, talking about troop withdrawal and when is the time to get out, and should Canada even be there now? The initial plan that Canada signed on to has been extended, and this isn't, it's just different now than it was in the very first time when we were invited, when there was 9/11 and there was the Taliban and all of that. And we know that there's an election coming. So, and I wonder what the future election, the impact it can have on the Canadian mission there.
Well, we are there at the direction of the Canadian government. The Canadian government will tell the military what it wants to do and what the rest of the government departments to do inside of Afghanistan. We'll do whatever they want us to do, and we'll work right up to the mandate in 2009, which is the military mandate. Mm-hmm. The Canadian other part of the mandate of the development goes to 2011, and that's $1 billion. That's $100 million a year for the next 10 years.
What's been the impact of the detainee and the torture scandal? What has been the impact there on the Canadian mission?
Canadians read the newspapers and see what's going on back there. But I was working under an agreement between the government of Afghanistan and Canada at the time, where we would hand over the detainees to legitimate Afghan authorities. Mm-hmm. We've now just enhanced that agreement so that now that if there's any allegation of mistreating of detainees, the Afghan government is obliged to go and investigate that and report back to us and to the ICRC. So we are following the policies that our leadership has given us.
I wonder are the soldiers being received the same way today as they would have been in the very beginning? Because I know that as time goes on and a war gets to be a little bit more complicated, and a lot of Afghan civilians have died, and there is certainly casualties of war. Do the people from Afghanistan look differently at the NATO troops that are there?
Afghans asked us to be there. Afghans still want us there. I mean, I was there for the 9 months. I mean, everywhere I went, Afghans were appreciative of what Canadians were doing. And I've been on, 26 years in the military, and I've been on a lot of missions and whatnot. But, it was the children of Afghanistan that sold me, because, when they came up and asked you for something, mm-hmm. they didn't ask you for food. They asked you for this, a pen. They want to learn. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, when kids come up to me and ask me for a pen they want to learn, it sold me right there. And I saw all the soldiers who got wounded and they came into the hospital, and I would go and try to console them. I failed every time because they consoled me. They charged my batteries.
There was a soldier that was killed on a mission to protect you, right? Well, tell me about that.
Well, in fact, I lost 4 soldiers in my party. Matt Dinning, Randy Payne, and 2 others. And those 2 were part of my close protection party. I mean, it hits close to home when you know them. And I went back and I visited their families, and I came back here and I thanked them for their service, and just said those 2 guys were heroes, absolute heroes.
When something like that happens, do you say, maybe I shouldn't go out there on the patrols? Do you ever have that moment where that's just a risk does that risk need to be taken?
The risk has to be taken. We can mitigate the risk. We've got great training, we've got great people, we've got good equipment. You put it all together, we can mitigate the risk. We know what the risk is wearing this uniform. You can't reduce it to 0. Every one of my men and women that I worked with out there understands it, but I'll tell you, every one of them believes in what they're doing, and they're going out there and they're doing it.
Okay, this question's going to sound stupid, but it's only because I don't want to make an assumption. Before you go to Afghanistan to command a bunch of troops, I assume you have a strategy.
We wrote a plan.
Right. When you get there, and as time goes on, how much did that plan have to change? How much did you have to adapt that plan?
Well, you fight the enemy guided by a plan. Mm-hmm. So I wrote a plan. And, I listened to the Afghan authorities, the governors and the police and the army, and we worked the plan. You worked the plan in accordance with what you're facing on the ground. And last summer and this past fall was a prime example where the Taliban were voting with a gun, but they lost.
Pakistan's Pervez Musharraf has suggested maybe it's time to sit down and talk to the Taliban. And, around the world we always hear that we don't, certain countries will not deal with certain organizations, but here we are years later, there's still this sort of war. What do you think about that idea of sitting down? And I wonder, is it just going on behind the scenes and we'll just never hear about it?
Well, it goes back. This is an Afghan problem. It's a Pakistani problem. Afghanistan and Pakistan will create the solution to it, and those countries have to sit down and figure out how to deal with the Taliban. We can't solve that problem. They're the only ones that can solve that one.
But if they want to sit down and talk to the Taliban, is that the kind of thing that the NATO troops would then say, okay, we can support this?
Well, first of all, we didn't do that, the NATO troops. Afghans were talking to the Taliban, and we reconciled and brought back a number of people. There, Mullah Ibrahim, we brought back into the fold. He wanted to side over with the government. The governor of Uruzgan, Governor Manib, he was Taliban, but today he is part of the Afghanistan government because he believes in the idea of Karzai, not the idea the Taliban are selling.
Thanks for coming in. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Brigadier General David Fraser. We're good to have him on the program. Okay, so when the hour returns, we'll get into this.